almost 3 weeks since we've had a Wednesday night service. We had a couple bad winter weather nights, last couple of Wednesday nights, we didn't get to have services. But if you remember back 3 weeks ago, if you've got that good of a memory, you might remember that we studied about Saul as he was out trying to find his father's donkeys. And he went to Samuel, and whenever he went to Samuel, Samuel had a message for him from God, and that was that he was going to be the first king of Israel. And so that's kind of where we are in the story of 1 Samuel here. We're going to be looking at chapters 10 and 11 tonight, and as I usually say, don't really have time to read, so I guess if you haven't read, had 3 weeks to do it, you probably never will. So we had 3 weeks to kind of read this one and go over it and think about it, so hopefully we'll have some pretty good discussion. Question number 1, though, on your handout, just to think about it question, goes kind of along with part of our theme for these 2 chapters. And the question starts out with, have you ever received a prestigious award or any kind of big recognition in your life? Anybody ever experienced that? I don't think I have. I mean, probably the biggest thing that I can think of is like a sports award or something in school that I ever received. Anybody got anything better than that? How about work? Anybody ever receive a prestigious work award? It's that good, is it? I think he's bragging back there. No, I can't really say that I can. Like I said, I can remember in grade school and, of course, playing some sports, receiving some awards. But generally, even if it is something like that, how does that generally make you feel when you receive recognition or an award? Good. Yeah, it's usually a good feeling, isn't it? Sometimes it can be a bad experience because you start to feel a little bit big in the britches, don't you? Start to feel a little bit of pride, maybe. Maybe you start to have thoughts that you might be better than everybody else. And basically, I think, how we would react to whether we've received a reward or not, how we would react to that says a lot about our character, doesn't it? Says a lot about who we are. Because we could either become very proud and very arrogant because of it, or we could maintain an humble attitude. We could feel very honored and privileged and feel like we didn't really deserve that award. I bring that up because Saul is being anointed as king here. And there's basically 2 outcomes that can come from that. Either Saul can become a very proud and arrogant individual, or else he can feel very honored and privileged to have that position and feel humbled by the experience itself.
What do you think the percentage is of people that go the humble route
Low.
versus the pride route?
Very, very low. Probably points of a percentage point. Wouldn't you say?
Well, you can look at the kings of Israel, and there was only a couple,
Yeah.
You look at politicians,
Yeah, generally, when you get recognition, and you get popularity, generally that tends to inflate a person's ego, doesn't it? It's kind of human nature. I think it's very rare to find a person who it doesn't affect in that manner. And, of course, we've studied Saul before as a king, and I usually say this about him. In the beginning, I think Saul was a very humble individual. I think he was a very good person and had great character. But how long was he king? That's right, 40 years. 40 years he served as king of Israel. And when you see Saul toward the end of his reign, how would you describe him then? Very arrogant, isn't he? Very proud, very paranoid. That's a good, like you said, a good word to describe him. So his character, I think that position of power over the years changed him and changed his character. So that's what we're going to be studying a little bit about. We're going to be studying about the good years, the early years of Saul here. So if you look back or you think back to 1 Samuel chapter 9, the chapter ends with Samuel having something to say to Saul. And he tells Saul's servant to go ahead and to go on. He gets Saul in private. And then Samuel reveals to him that he's going to be anointed as the first king of Israel. And he tells him in chapter 10, there's some things that are going to happen to him. Remember, he's going back to his father. He's going back because Samuel has told him his father's donkeys have been found. Now his father's worried about him. So he's going back on that return journey. And as he's going, Samuel tells him, you're going to encounter some things, and these things are going to be signs that what I've told you is going to come to pass, that indeed you're going to be the first anointed as the first king of Israel. There's basically 3 signs that Samuel predicted that would happen. Question number 2 here. What were those 3 signs? Somebody give me one.
Prophesy.
Okay, he would run into a group of prophets, wouldn't he? And he would also become a prophet. He would prophesy. That was one of them. What's another one? Okay, he would meet 2 men that told him his donkeys had been found, right? What's the third one? Yeah, he's going to meet 3 men who were on their way to Bethel to worship. They were going to have some certain animals and food with them, and they were going to give him 2 loaves of the 3 loaves of bread that they had to eat. Now, as you read through those particular prophecies, what stands out to you about them? Or does anything stand out to you about them? Okay, so they were really just ordinary, everyday events, weren't they? But what stood out to me when I read through them is how detailed they were. You know, it wasn't like you'll just go to meet 2 guys and they're going to say, you're good, your donkeys have been found. He says, you come to this place, and this particular point in this journey, you're going to meet these 2 guys. They're going to tell you exactly that these donkeys have been found, that your father's worried about you. You go a little further on in your journey. You stop at the oak tree. What is it? Oak tree, I don't remember. Terebinth tree, maybe some versions. Anyway, certain oak tree, certain terebinth tree in a certain place. When you get there, then you're going to meet these 3 men who are on their way to worship. One of them's going to have 3 kids, 3 goats, that is, 3 young goats. Another one's going to have 3 loaves of bread. They're going to give you 2 loaves of this bread for you to eat. You go ahead and take them. He talks about meeting the prophets, running into the school of prophets is probably being talked about here, and then that he was going to prophesy too. So they weren't like just some vague prediction that was going to come to pass. They were very detailed. They were very specific, and all this was used to try to encourage Saul and to reinforce the idea that he's going to become the first king of Israel. So Saul eventually gets home. All these things happen to him. He eventually gets home. He runs into his uncle, and his uncle starts asking him about where he's been. Now remember, he's been gone for a number of days on this journey. So he said, what have you been doing? Because obviously the donkeys are back here. He knew that they hadn't found them. And so what does he reveal to his uncle here? Question number 3. What's he telling him he's been doing? Or what has he done? Now, one of the things that he reveals to him is he said, well, we've been out looking for these donkeys. Did he tell him anything else?
No, or at least not about the prophecy about being king yet.
Okay, that was one thing that he did not tell him about, right? Did he tell him about going and seeing Samuel? Yeah. They said, we couldn't find the donkeys, and so we decided we'd go see Samuel. He knows, he can tell everything. Anything he says comes to pass. And so we went to see him about how to figure out how to find these donkeys. Like Adam pointed out, one of the important details, though, of the story that he leaves out is he does not say anything about Samuel anointing him as the next king of Israel. It's also interesting to me. He doesn't say anything about these 3 events that happened that day that Samuel predicted. Nothing about the details of these. So he's very vague in his reply. And why do you think that is? You read about Saul. He was supposed to wait for Samuel for 7 days. And can you imagine, for 7 days you know this, and it's not like anybody else knows it. You were the only one that Samuel told it to. But he doesn't talk to anybody about it. And it's like it never even happened. It's just like he goes about his ordinary actions, his everyday life, and doesn't even discuss it with anybody. So my question is this: why do you think that's the case? Why do you think he didn't tell his uncle? If you were, if you got that good news, just like that prestigious award or recognition, would you want people to know about it?
Probably not the case, but he could have just been modest.
Okay, so you think he's just being modest and not mentioning it? I don't know. The Bible doesn't really say for sure, does it? Anybody else think differently? Okay.
Maybe it's like Gideon with the fleece. I know Saul or Samuel just proven it with 3. He told him the next 3 things to come, so this was from God, so he knew that. Maybe just being like Gideon, like, well, let's try it. Now let's get the fleece not wet and ground wet.
Yeah.
Wait and see if it came true. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not really sure why. You know that everybody knew that a king was coming. You know that because they'd met together and they'd already made that decision, and Samuel had already announced that, God's going to give you a king. So they had to know it was just a matter of time before a king was going to be appointed over them. But you would think he'd be excited, wouldn't you? You'd think he'd be proud at the opportunities that lay before him. Why he wasn't, I don't know. As good as anybody's guess. But I think, again, when you look at him in his early life, he's really timid, and he's really a humble individual. And so I don't know if that plays into it or not, but it is interesting to notice.
I just got a question. It says Saul prophesied with the other prophets. What do you think he was saying? What was he prophesying?
I don't know. It doesn't really say, does it?
It was obvious that he was prophesying because the people seen it.
Yeah.
And they said, what's going on here, basically?
Yeah.
With Saul.
Yeah, I don't know what the message was. Be interesting to know, wouldn't it? But like the scripture says, that it was so unique, it actually became a proverb. People use that saying, is Saul also among the prophets? It was, if something happened that was really out of the ordinary, that's the proverb, or the saying that they used to describe it. So it was a memorable event, wasn't it? It was something that certainly the people took notice of. So let's see here. Question number 4. So Samuel calls the whole nation together at Mizpah, and that's, of course, to point out to the people who God has chosen to be their king. And whenever he does that, we read about Saul. Where's Saul in all of these happenings?
He's hiding.
Yeah, he's hiding. And so how did they figure out who's going to be the next king of Israel? Now, Samuel already knew, right? Because he'd already anointed as a Saul 7 days ago. But how does he do it in front of all the people? Okay. Do what? I can't hear very good anymore, Steve.
Had each tribe come by, and then he picked the tribe, and he got each family come by.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for there in verse 19. It talks about presenting themselves before the Lord by your tribes and by your clans. And it says, when Samuel caused all the tribes of Israel to come near, the tribe of Benjamin was chosen. Well, how do you think they were chosen? How'd they do the choosing in that day and age?
A lot of lots were cast. But
Usually, yeah. usually you had the lots that were cast, and you'd have a tribe come forward. Is this the lot or not, or is this the tribe or not that the king's going to come out of? Cast the lots. No, that's not it. Okay, next tribe. And after you get the right tribe, then you say, next family, come up, cast the lots. Is this the family? So it was kind of a drawn out procedure. But why do you think they would have done it that way? Why didn't Samuel just march in front of him and say, God chose Saul and let's anoint him?
Prove it was God's doing.
Yeah, I think it was to prove to the people that this is the guy that God chose, right? This is the one that's going to be the next king of Israel. So if the lot falls upon Saul, but then they start looking around for Saul and nobody can find him. So he's out there. How do they figure out where Saul is? Nobody knows, right?
I think God told him.
Yeah, Jehovah God reveals to him where he is. He said he's hiding with all the stuff. So they got to go send somebody to get him. Now, I want you to once again kind of stop and think, and why do you think Saul's hiding? Right? He knows he's going to be the next king of Israel. It's not a shock. It's not a surprise. Samuel's already told him this.
He almost acts like he's afraid of the job.
Yeah, I don't know. Was he humble? Yeah, he was a humble individual. But I think, again, when you kind of look at him, he feels like he's inadequate, doesn't he? I mean, he's a little bit timid about this idea that he's going to be the first king of Israel. And what generally happens whenever we're afraid or we feel inadequate? When God tells us to do something and we're afraid and we feel inadequate, what do? We hide, don't we? Not me. Yeah, somebody else. We try to find something to hide behind, and I think that's kind of where Saul was. But think about this. Go ahead, Daryl.
How old was Saul at this time?
I don't know. Did it say in there anywhere? Anybody pick up on it?
Young, isn't he?
I don't recall, Daryl. Honestly.
How old was he when he died? We can figure it out.
Yeah, you math whizzes, get together.
40 years.
Get together and compute it up for us.
I'll Google it here.
Okay. Google's always right. So probably give us a better idea though than what I have for sure.
Kind of ironic too that he was trying to hide, and he was head and shoulders bigger than everybody.
Yeah, he's this huge guy, and he's trying to hide, from everybody else. But why did Israel want a king? Do you remember some of the reasons they wanted a king? Okay, they want to be like everybody else, but what do they want their king to do?
Lead them back.
Lead them. Fight their wars. Go ahead. Did you find it?
It said he was 30 when he became to reign. Now that's
Okay.
Google, so
Okay.
I think what it's worth.
That's probably accurate. So it kind of gives us an idea. But, you think about Saul again, he's head and shoulders above everybody else. But here he is, he's hiding. And the people wanted somebody to lead them. They wanted somebody to fight their wars. They wanted somebody to lead them in and out. They wanted somebody to lead make their choices and decisions for them. You think that's a very good start for your first king? Here's the guy, and what's he doing? He's over here hiding. Can you imagine saying, how's this guy going to lead us into war? How's he going to be our head and tell us what to do and overcome our enemies? And there's kind of some backlash, I think, because of that. If you go down, in fact, to the end of chapter 10 here in verse 27, some people they asked this question, how can this man save us? And so they despised him and brought him no presents. Well, I think that had to do with part of the idea they had to even find him because he was hiding in the first place to appoint him as king of Israel. So, question number 5 here, how does Samuel present Saul to the people to kind of try to enhance his popularity with him? Not a good way to start out, right?
There's no one like him.
Yeah. So he accents his physical characteristics, doesn't he? When he starts talking about how big he is and how tall he is, well, what do the people do after that? Yeah, they were impressed then. They said, yeah, this is the guy. He looks like a king. So Samuel tells the people part of what was going to be God's stipulations is they had to write down the rules for the king, and then they were to be deposited before the Lord. It means the priest kept them probably in the holy city somewhere. You can read some of those characteristics. I think one of the references was Deuteronomy 17:14-20. I was going to read it, but we don't have time to do that tonight. But you'll basically, if you go there and you'll read about how the king of Israel was to be different from all the other kings surrounding. He wasn't supposed to multiply animals to himself. He wasn't supposed to multiply wives to himself. He wasn't supposed to hoard up gold and silver. He was supposed to follow the laws of God, study them, read them day and night, and not depart from the right hand or to the left hand. So, how is that different from the nations around him?
Evidently they did all those things.
Well, it's completely the opposite, isn't it? You know, did all these other kings, did they multiply wives to themselves? Yeah, hundreds of wives. Did they hoard up gold and silver? Yeah. Did they hoard up livestock? Did they have tremendous armies? Yeah, all those things were true. And so the king, God's king, was supposed to be different than all the other nations and the kings of the nations around them. Today, God's people are still supposed to be different, aren't they? You're supposed to be distinct and separate and really live the opposite of the way that the world lives, or at least carries out their life here today. So, God's king was supposed to be different. We talked about question number 7 here. Small minority of the people treated Saul. They despised him, and they rejected him as being their king. They basically said, this guy can't save us. He can't do what we want him to do. How did Saul respond to that?
He held his peace.
Yeah. In other words, he kept silent. He just ignored them. He didn't take any kind of physical action against them. He didn't even say anything verbally against them. Now think about, again, the end of Saul's reign. If somebody had spoken against him then, how do you think he would have reacted?
Killed him.
Yeah, he would have killed him. Not even thought about it twice, right? But he wasn't like that in the beginning. He was just a different, his character was just almost completely different. So in chapter 11, we read about a story about Jabesh Gilead, and one of the rallying points around Saul as the first king of Israel. So there's a foreign king that comes against them, against Jabesh Gilead. Basically, they send peace negotiators out to them, and they wanted to know if there were any conditions on which they could surrender. And so what are the conditions that king lays down? Where are we at here now? Question number 8.
Put out the right eye.
Yeah, so he said, if you let me poke out your right eye of every citizen, then I'll accept your surrender. Now, why would he do something like that? Or why would he make that request? Any significance in it?
Make them separate.
Okay, that would certainly make them distinct, wouldn't it? If you had to fight somebody, and you had 2 guys, they were the same build, same size, same abilities. One had 2 eyes and one only had 1. Which one would you pick? Which one?
2-eyed.
You would fight the 2-eyed
I
guy?
want the 2-eyed guy to fight with me.
Okay, so you would fight the 1-eyed guy, right? Why is that?
He can't see me coming from one side.
Yeah, he's at a disability, isn't he? And so the Bible, I think it's also mentions in there, it was in part to humiliate them, but it also hampered them physically. It kind of made it harder for them if they were going to rebel. It would have been harder for them to fight and to lead a rebellion. So Saul hears about this particular threat or terms of surrender, and how does he react to that? Question number 9. Yeah, so he chops up the oxen that he's working with, he sends them throughout all Israel, and basically he says, if you guys don't respond, this is what's going to happen to you. This is what you're going to look like. What do you think about his response? Did he have a right to be angry?
I think he's the king.
Okay, he is the king, that's for sure.
He could be angry if he wants to.
I think it was righteous anger that God's people being oppressed, poked fun of, and they were trying to make them all lame.
Yeah,
And it reads almost like it did with before Samson did some great feat. Didn't it say the Spirit of God, I don't know what exact words were, but moved on him or moved
Yeah.
on him.
yeah,
It reads almost like that, like God is directing this action here.
yeah, yeah. So it's a righteous response, and it's really kind of a picture, like you said. It talks about the Spirit of God came upon him. It's really a picture of God's anger. You know, the fact that these people would come in here and then, try to poke out their right eye in order, or get them to submit to that so they don't end up dead, did not sit well with God. And so Saul's reaction, I guess you could say it persuaded, it coerced, it motivated the soldiers, the men of Israel, to respond to his call. So what size is the army that gathers? Question 10 here. 330,000 respond. And they go and they march to Jabesh Gilead. They attack the enemy. And what's the result of that? By noon, the Bible says. By noon, the battle was over. Can you imagine that? I mean, usually when you read about wars during this day and time, they were kind of a long, drawn-out process. But here comes Saul and this army, and they start in the morning. By noon, the battle's over. And so it had to be really impressive in the eyes of the Israelites, what Saul was able to do, the number of men that he was able to rally, how quickly the battle and the victory was won here over the enemy. And of course, it's a great lesson for us in that, because alone, the Jabesh Gileadites, they could have never defeated the enemy. But when all Israel united, there was nobody that could beat them. It wasn't even a fight. The battle was over very quickly. Good lesson on unity. So after this happens, how do the people feel about that minority that we talked about a little bit earlier, who criticized Saul? What consequence did they propose? What should happen to those people? Yeah, they thought they should be put to death. But what was Saul's reaction to this idea?
He was wise once again.
Yeah, he said, "Listen, God won the battle here. We're going to act like godly people. We're not going to kill our own brothers and sisters. We're not going to put anybody to death here today. We're going to honor God with godly actions." And so, once again, good leader, part of being a good leader is showing restraint whenever necessary. This was one of those times. Later on in his life, Saul would have been right on board, I'm sure of it. But early on, he was just a different person. And then we read kind of the overall mood in Israel after this victory is what? Question 13. What do? They rejoice, they rally around Saul, they go to Gilgal, they confirm him as being their king, and now I think everybody is on board and recognizes that this is going to be truly a great leader of Israel. They also worship God. They also offer sacrifices and offerings to God. So a very good start here to the reign of Saul. All right, anybody got any thoughts or comments or questions? Go ahead, Daryl.
Well, Saul demonstrated his ability to lead. Because he gathered the army, he had strategic plans, divided them into 3 groups, and I assume they come from different directions, and so the people recognize that, so that's what convinced them. This is our king.
Yeah, certainly. I think, like you said, they saw the evidence that he was a capable leader whenever that and how quickly everything transpired. Just an overwhelming experience for Israel at a time when they had been oppressed sorely by their enemies. So, anybody else?
Was it really Saul that gave him the victory, though?
No, it was God's plan. It's like every other plan that's always followed. We accredited it to Saul, and I'm sure the people did too, didn't they? I mean, that's what they saw whenever the battle was won. But Saul, again, to his credit, he gave God all the credit for what happened. He understood why they won the battle. So, All right, Lord willing, next week we'll pick up in chapter 12.